Hey everyone, Dan here. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps lots. And also keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that. Enjoy. All right, folks, here we are on Wednesday, May 25th. We're going to take a look at SoFi. So SoFi had a really nice day today, as you know, the bulk of the market generally held pretty strong and it had nice green days across the board. You see NASDAQ up over 1.5%. And as we've seen for quite some time, maybe all of SoFi's life, growth and SoFi in particular, generally having outsized reactions to, say, NASDAQ, for example. So NASDAQ is up a little bit, SoFi can be up quite a bit. NASDAQ's down a little bit, SoFi can be down quite a bit. Unfortunately, we've seen much more action to the downside since SoFi has been public, but that's just where we are. So we have to deal with that, take it for what it's worth. But in any case, I wanted to sort of check in on these levels that we have and sort of see what it's doing. Now it's kind of sort of systematically trying to range bound itself. It looks like to me, you see it spends a couple days in a range, tries to make a break, and then has this sort of like really volatile action, tries to establish a range again, breaks, trying to establish a range again now. So now the question is like, do we want to be between 650 and 7, or do we want to be between 7 and just say 750? I think that's the question that it's struggling with at the moment. And of course, I think it's still largely beholden to many of the macro factors in the overall market. And especially with, quantitative tightening coming, I do still have a large concern around what that reality is actually going to bring to the market on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. So we'll see, but I'm still hopeful for days ahead when SoFi can just start acting as an independent or relatively independent stock again. That would be a nice thing to see, as opposed to just getting slaughtered with much of the market and then having some slight green fluctuations here and there. They don't even feel like runs, they just feel like green fluctuations. So to me, that's the question at the moment. Does this want to be between 650 and 7? Does this want to be between 7 and 750? And then, as recent history has shown, it does put in these sometimes just a couple or a few day ranges and then have some really volatile action. So is there volatile action coming up? And if so, which way does it break? Does it break above 750 and make an attempt at 8? Does it break below 650 and make an attempt at 6? I think that's sort of two questions. Range bound between 650 and 7, or 7 and 750. That's one question. And the other one is, when it range breaks and has a huge volatile swing, does it swing like towards 6, or does it swing toward 8? So I think we have a couple of sort of points to keep our eyes on as things roll out over the next few days and weeks. On the daily chart here, we see it's trying still. Now, we talked about this when it was approaching this downtrend resistance. We were saying that it can often break above and then come back down and just keep refollowing that downtrend resistance, but it just is now situated above that. So it's almost treating it like downtrend support. That's kind of like a silly concept, but it in effect ends up doing the same thing, right? Continuing to draw down in that general pattern, but it just is situated outside of that resistance line as opposed to inside of it. To me, it looks like it's fighting to not do that at the moment, right? It had its break, and then it did that thing where it's like, okay, is this just going to come down and start following it outside? But today, to me, sort of showed that it wants to try at least to, either go for another like upward swing here, or establish in a range and get itself some distance from here. We saw that the thing I'm discussing right now, we saw that exact thing happen here, right? It came down and then just broke down through and just ended up below that resistance level again. So it's fighting right now to make that not happen. We didn't see it put up that fight here. We saw a really quick retracement and re-entry underneath that downtrend resistance. So it's not doing that at the moment, so it's a slightly better sign, but it still is really wrestling quite closely to that sort of like reality, that potential reality of re-entering this downtrend resistance or following it around the outside. So really interested to see what the rest of the week puts in. Do we drag ourselves down toward here? Do we move away, or there's two ways to gain some distance from this. So that's like the slightly good news here, right? There's one way to get closer, and that's just to come back toward it. But either by just going sideways or by going up, we can gain some distance from this downtrend resistance. So where, if you want to give all of those things equal opportunity, we're sort of like a 2/3 potentially not re-entering this downtrend resistance situation. But that to me will begin to play out in the next couple of days, and then we'll really have a much better idea toward the end of next week, I think. So in about, I would say like end of next week, like next Friday, have a really good sense of like where does this want to maneuver itself. But again, that still is sort of like just in front of quantitative tightening, and I do worry about what that does to any of these sort of like trends or structures that we start to put in ahead of that happening. I don't know. It's a question, but it's certainly a concern that I have. And if SoFi has taught us anything, it's that we should be concerned, right? Because this is what the weekly chart looks like. All right, so I'm going to flip over and just sort of like get an update here on where the short situation sits as far as market beat is concerned. I poked around a little bit. Things are generally floating around this 19, 20, 21, 22% area. So market beat has it at 22.46. The interesting thing I thought here was they have the change from the previous month down about 1.05%. So this would show shorts peeling back a little bit. Now compare that obviously to these huge increases that they had for several reporting periods, and that's pretty minuscule. But the question is, does this sort of signify maybe them wanting to back off for a little bit, sort of feeling like they've done their dirty deed for now? I don't know. It's hard for me to try to unpack the psychology of a short seller, exactly when they come in hot and heavy and when they sort of decide to back off and why. But it'll be interesting to see what the next report date brings, and if we see a continuation of any sort of pullback from short sellers or not. Now, I scrolled back a few days. This is back on the 19th, which I think was last Thursday. And we see the fee getting, some legs at that point, 7.5%. It still is nowhere near where we'd want it to be in order to really start to fend off the shorts, because the fee is just so dang high. I really like to see triple digits for that on the fee, but even like 40% or higher starts to sort of like pique my interest. But obviously very few shares to borrow here. Fee getting a little bit higher, but then what we see is even though the availability sort of fluctuates quite a bit, right? Some are sort of come back into the broker, and then a bunch are lent back out, but we see the fee coming down a little bit, right? And we see that similar thing happen here, fee coming down. So the fee is continuing to not help us at all, while the available shares throughout the days, now we're on the 23rd, as you can see, has continued to be, it's not as though there's been a huge number of shares that have been given back to the broker on the order of like, oh, now there's 4 million or 5 million or 10 million, right? There's not that level of closing up shop, but we do see the fee continuing to come down and down and down. So while I don't think that 7.5 would have necessarily put a bunch of pressure on the short sellers to start to close up shop because the fee was high, and if the price action was going against them, then they're losing on both ends of that. While it still is unfortunate to see it then coming down, even when available shares are also coming down through certain periods. So now, we get to today and we're just hovering above 4%. So again, I think for me, for this fee to play any real part, I would look for it to 10x or so. I don't know when or how exactly that would play out, but continue to keep an eye on it. And hey, to me, best case scenario is We don't have to worry about the fee. We don't have to worry about the available shares. The price starts to recover in and of itself. And then we see this number start to come down. The percentage of the free float that's being shorted just continues to come down, and shorts just kind of back themselves back out and come down into, some single digits here. I would love to see that. I don't know if it'll happen. You see the sort of impact on the price here, right? This was hovering and had broken above $20 at this point when we were in the single digits, and then started to come down as short sellers really picked up steam, and it had some huge increases and then just crushed the stock price. So we'll see what happens, but in any case, there's nothing I can necessarily do about it, obviously, other than to keep an eye on it and try to keep a grasp on what's happening. All right, folks, I hope that you had a happy hump day and that your trading week is going well. And as always, I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next video.